things are kind of back to normal. You can, I think restaurants are completely open, not just patios. Movie theaters are open. I went to see a movie shortly after I was 2 weeks out from my second shot,
Yeah.
and was back in a theater, and it was great. I saw a giant ape and a giant lizard beat the hell out of each other for 2 hours,
Yes.
eating a bucket of popcorn. So it was.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, and joining me is a repeat guest. For a while there, Ron Martz was joining me like every week. And so it's actually been a few months since he's been on. But Ron, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Jesse. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I tell you what. I thought of you when a few weeks ago I had Amanda Lear on the phone, and she had done the Stephen King, Bruce Springsteen quiz for the website. And I don't know if you saw that, but
Oh yeah, I did. It was perfect.
it was, in fact, I wish there was a way, like, if we had not known it in advance to actually have done that live, right? Like pulled that up and go, okay, let's guess. It was just beautiful of, how many, first off, she did it obviously so that both of them, the line did a Stephen King story or novel as well as a Springsteen song, but it was hilarious how many of them I at least went immediately, oh, that's got to be Stephen King. Then you're like, oh, that's got to be Bruce. And then a couple like, okay, that could be either one.
Yeah, I mean, it was perfect, and in a lot of ways, Bruce and King are sort of my twin huge influences in
Yes.
terms of what I write and how I approach what I do. So I immediately saw that, and I was like, man, I got to talk to her someday.
Yeah, she was really nice, and I am hoping to have her on again. I thought she was very creative. She does mostly satire, which was just perfect. It was just really great. So it's June. Well, it's July in 2021. We're going to catch up. You have a new Kickstarter to talk about, but in this new our second summer of COVID. How are you doing?
Well, like the last time we talked, pandemic isn't all that different for a guy that works at home. Uh,
Yes.
when people say, "Oh, how are you? How are you adjusting?" And there's no adjustment at all. This is what I've been doing for 30 years.
Yeah.
So sort of, you're sort of shamefaced when you have to admit that. So I mean, for me, obviously, it wasn't a whole different way of living. Um, Obviously, last summer you couldn't really go to restaurants and sit inside. You couldn't go to the gym. Um, there were adjustments to be made. You couldn't go to a summer shed concert.
Well,
Um,
and
all of that. So all of that stuff kind of went away. But um, you adjust. You deal with it because we as a society have to do this thing and get over it. It doesn't work unless we're all pulling in the same direction.
yeah, and if I remember correct, and I could be wrong, and luckily, no one's gonna I only think the person I'm gonna embarrass is me in front of you, right? Like you were talking about, you were taking your daughter's car to the shop, and normally you guys would have stopped for breakfast and at this place that you guys liked, and like you couldn't. And so those are the small things. Texas opened up several months ago. I would make the argument maybe a little too early, but our governor tends to be wanting to, he's in a race with the Florida governor on who could be the most crazy, at
Yeah,
least in that.
who's the worst guy?
Yeah, yeah.
I think the, you know, let's give guns to everybody like candy puts your governor ahead right now.
Yes.
But I'm assuming Governor DeSantis will up the ante at some point.
Yeah, he will say, "Hold my beer,"
It's
right?
a
Like he will say, "Oh,
it's
really?" Uh,
it's really a, you know, it just seems like we're moving further and further in the direction of two almost completely different countries. And I, you know,
yeah,
I don't think it's good, and I hope it doesn't continue. But when you're faced with a, you know, uh, with a situation like this, where, you know, it's just like, look, just, you know, just go get vaccinated, and then nobody has to worry about it. And people are dead set against getting a vaccination that is 95% effective, which is an amazing number. I think mostly because they've been told they shouldn't get it by their chosen media. It's just that we live in a very odd time where people feel like they get to choose their own realities. And ultimately, science doesn't care what reality you choose. Science is science.
yeah, and I do agree with that, and it is kind of like crazy. Um, there's so much to talk about that, and I'm sitting there going, why? Um, there was a an East Coast, looks like she's a talk show host, that did an article, and I tweeted it, like, she's like, okay, I'm not going to go to Bruce because he's requiring me to be vaccinated. And I'm like, first off, Bruce isn't requiring anyone to do anything. The state of New York and the city of New York have come up with guidelines for reopening Broadway. He has no, you want to talk about what songs he picks on the set list? Yes, that's Bruce's call. But what's in the audience? And then I have cracked up at the people that, and I think it's a legitimate thought, is that there was a Canadian vaccine that had been approved for Canada, but US had not approved it, and so therefore it wasn't considered that it isn't a legitimate vaccine. And someone brought up, I said, this is a really good thought on how are we going to do this with different countries. And they ended up allowing those, so people from Canada can go see Springsteen on Broadway, or more importantly, you can go back and forth. But I mean, that was a legitimate discussion, that how much do you trust another government's approval of a vaccine?
Yeah, it's, well, you know, I'm talking to a lot of friends, a lot of writers and artists that live in other countries, um, and they're literally dying for the vaccine. I spoke to a couple of friends in Brazil over the last few days, and their situation is not good. They don't have enough vaccine. They're not quite certain that the vaccine they do have, because they're importing it from China, is as effective as they would like it to be. Um, the rollout is very, very slow. And, you know, and here we've got people bitching and moaning that, oh, I don't want to go get the vaccine, but let me go into a Broadway theater that's tightly packed. Broadway theaters are notoriously small, and the seats are packed in together. You know, I don't want to get the vaccine, but I don't want to have to suffer any consequences for it. I mean, just grow up,
Yeah,
grow
and
up, go get jabbed. It's the easiest thing in the world to do. I mean, as soon as I was eligible, I drove to Syracuse, which is 2.5 miles away from me, to get my shots, and
well,
I was thrilled to do it. Um,
I've
so
shared this. Yeah,
it just baffles me that, you know, that we are such a spoiled society that we feel like, well, I don't want to get that because I, you know, I did my own research from some idiot on YouTube who said that, you know, maybe it's not effective, or it puts nanotechnology into my body from Bill Gates, or whatever other ludicrous conspiracy theories you want. And those people want to be taken seriously. This is a very simple thing. You know, you want to go into a convenience store and buy a soda and a bag of chips before you go to the beach. You know, no shoes, no shirt, no service. The business
Yeah.
sets the rules. If you don't want to adhere to that, that's fine, but you can't go in. And this is the same thing. If you don't want to be vaccinated, okay, fine, but you don't get to come in.
Well, and when this first came up, Ron, and I've talked about this on the podcast, right? To to sign up my son for Little League, right? I had to not only bring his birth certificate, but I had to show that he had all his he was up to date on his shots, his vaccines, you know, and it is just it is a health thing. It isn't a political thing, and I think that's one of the sad things about it.
Well,
Uh,
I think about where we were, a few decades ago
yeah,
in terms of regulations coming out that say you got to wear your seatbelt.
right,
If you're in a car, you have to wear a seatbelt.
yeah,
Like if that came out now, people would lose their minds
yes,
simply because they're being told to wear a seatbelt. Now, obviously, wearing seatbelts has saved countless lives,
yes,
but we've come to a point where in America in 2021, if you tell someone to do something, a segment of the population is going to refuse no matter what it is. If you are giving ice cold water to people dying in the desert, they would refuse it simply because you told them to have a drink of water.
yeah.
And it's, I don't know that there's any fix for it because, like the man said, there's no fixing stupid.
Well, and you know, I'm right there with you, and there are things that, and we'll get off politics in a minute, but you know, when I hear that the laws that in Texas that you can show your gun permit and that is considered a valid ID to vote, but your University of Texas student ID is not.
Yeah, well,
Excuse me?
it tells you an obvious. It tells you what the obvious priorities are, and it
Yeah,
also tells you where the lobbyist money is coming from.
yeah, exactly. And that's just crazy. But have you been able to go out a little bit? Have
Yeah,
you
well,
gotten to?
I'm in New York State, so
Yeah,
we hit 70% vaccinated. I think last week.
well done.
Again, there's, I think I read something like some of the southern states are like 30%,
Yeah,
which just, again, is mind-boggling that there's that sort of dichotomy in how people are approaching this. Um, so here in New York State,
yeah.
everything's kind of back to normal in that sense.
Hmm.
There's no more social distancing required. There's no more masks required unless you are unvaccinated.
Right.
Um, if you go into a store or a restaurant and you are unvaccinated, you're supposed to be wearing a mask. Um, Now, my assumption is that the unvaccinated people among us are not doing that anyway,
Right.
because they're obstinate and belligerent. Um, but we're reaching the point of we're starting to get to the point of herd immunity, and the cases are very low here anyway. So uh, things are things are kind of back to normal. You can, I think restaurants are completely open, not just patios. Uh,
Hmm.
Movie theaters are open. I went to see a movie shortly after I was 2 weeks out from my second shot,
Yeah.
and was back in a theater, and it was great. I saw a giant ape and a giant lizard beat the hell out of each other for 2 hours,
And you're just like, this
eating a
is greatness.
eating a bucket of popcorn. So it was great, and the tickets for music venues are back on sale, and
Yeah.
so at least here we're getting back to normal. Comic conventions are coming back, and invitations to appear at shows are coming in. So little by little, we're getting back to normal. So I think that's just how it's going to go. There are going to be states and areas in this country where people got vaccinated, and we're going to
Hmm.
get back to a semblance of normalcy. And there are going to be other places where people aren't bothering, and a lot of people are going to get sick, and some people are going to die.
Yeah.
and it's a, you know, it's a grim choice that people are making for others, including children, because obviously children are not 12 or 11 and under. 12 were approved for 12 and up. 11 and under are in this weird gray zone of you're not vaccinated yet, but your things are sort of returning to normal. So you know, hopefully very few people pay that price.
Yeah, my hope is that too. Um, we have tickets to see Marsha Ball on August 14th. You know, from New Orleans, great, you know, musician. We're excited about going to see her perform. We've, you know, we've started now, you know, going to see, you know, like friends, like, okay, are you vaccinated? You're vaccinated. Okay, let's get together because it's been too long since we've been able to see each other. And so that is making us very happy.
Yeah,
Uh,
it feels like a reward.
yeah, it
Um,
does.
it feels like uh, we suffered for more than a year, and now I can go out and meet friends for a beer. I can
Yeah.
uh, and actually I'm doing some of the stuff that I did last summer, like play softball and play golf. That's obviously an outdoor thing,
Hmm.
and that feels very normal. That feels very safe. So it's um, you know, I think
Yeah.
I think we have a short cultural memory.
Hmm.
So my suspicion is that in a year or two, people won't even remember what this was like,
Yeah.
because we tend to forget what happened in the recent past and just go back to the way we think things should be.
Yeah.
So
Now
I
you
hope there
mentioned,
aren't hard lessons
yeah,
learned.
I hope so too. You mentioned conventions. What's the latest? When are you got any to schedule or?
Um, yeah, I've agreed to. It's funny. I've mostly agreed to do the shows that I had agreed to do in 2020,
Yes.
that got scrapped, that just went by the boards because we couldn't do them. So I'm doing Awesome Con in Washington D.C. at the end of August, which was a reschedule from 2020. I'm doing Rose City Convention in Portland, Oregon in September, and um, uh, Granite State Con in Manchester, New Hampshire in September as well. Both of those were also reschedules. And then I will be in Sioux Falls, South Dakota for the first time in my life in October.
Well, very nice. Well, I was very tempted to go to Dragon Con this year. Um, Decided that with, you know, going through all the surgeries and all the health things, that I didn't think it was right to my first trip out of town after my wife has been so supportive. Like, hey, I'm going to comic convention, so we're going
See
to,
ya.
yeah, I see ya. You know, and instead, I've reached out to, I have a couple people um, that run the tracks at Dragon Con, and one of them I specifically said despite my hope is Bruce is touring next year, but my hope is that I'll be able to at least see a couple of Bruce shows and still make Dragon Con next fall.
Yeah,
So
um, I'm a little more apprehensive of the huge shows.
yes, I can see
Um,
that.
just because I mean the huge shows are an ordeal anyway.
Yeah.
Um, so like I will probably put in an appearance at New York Comic Con, but I won't be setting up. I won't be there every day.
Do you usually go to Comic Con in San Diego?
Yeah, I usually end up out there most years.
Okay.
I think the last few years I've kind of ended up on the every other year
Okay.
program. Um, that's you work like a dog to get ready for San Diego, and then you have this San Diego experience, and then you come back and you collapse for a week because you were in San Diego. It sort of blows a 3-week hole into your schedule. So it's certainly, it's an epic thing that
Yes.
I've seen grow from fairly humble beginnings.
Yeah.
I think the first year I was out there was probably 92 or 93.
Hmm.
Um, and it was just the convention center itself was a
Yeah.
third of the size that it is now. And um, the Gaslamp district, which, borders the convention center and has a baseball stadium in it now. And like none of that stuff was there. The other side of the tracks from the convention center was literally the other side of the tracks. San Diego is a Navy town, so it was full of massage parlors and hourly hotels and tattoo
Yeah.
joints and liquor stores. So you were, as a as a young impressionable comic creator, you were told, yeah, don't wander too far up those streets after dark. So to see what it is now, to see that the sort of gentrification that has happened through all of those streets, in large part due to Comic-Con. I mean, other conventions there too as well, but really Comic-Con is the economic engine that drives all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Plus the baseball stadium having moved in there. Um, I've seen these edifices, knock down buildings and build a new building, and now that building's been knocked down 2 or 3 times to build something grander. It's really a process that has happened, and it's almost like time lapse because you see it once a year. You go out and you have your Comic-Con experience, and you're like, oh, there's a Hard Rock Hotel there now. It's no longer this a little corner Mexican restaurant. It's this huge corporate edifice. So it's an interesting thing to see how it's evolved, and frankly the baseball stadium being there has made a huge impact. I've been going to San Diego long enough that there was no baseball stadium there, and then
Yeah.
there was a baseball stadium, and there were games during Comic-Con. So you had these two rather huge crowds converging. People from the baseball, people that were there for the baseball game, and the people coming out of Comic-Con, and they've done away with that. Like the Padres are now out of town every time the Comic-Con comes to town. Because the stadium also gets used as a venue.
Well, and we've talked about it. I love Dragon Con. I've never made it to San Diego, um, and that is one of the beauties of Dragon Con in Atlanta, is there's usually 2 or 3 college football teams in town for some kind of tournament, and there's usually a conference, and there's just all kinds of mixing. Um, I always think of our friend Tom Zoller, says that when he sees people drinking at San Diego, it's to numb the pain. When he sees people drinking at Dragon Con, it's because they seem to be having fun. Uh,
Yeah, there's a certain amount of truth to that. I
yeah.
mean, San Diego's a bit of an ordeal to be survived.
Yes.
I think everybody should see it once and then
Yes.
decide if you want to see it twice.
Right.
It's and obviously the media coverage of it now has just fueled incredible interest for people to want to be out there.
Yeah.
It's people who have really no idea about comics and maybe aren't huge fans of the movies or anything, but it's a cultural happening now.
Yes.
So so you go out there and you spend the better part of 4.5 days with 150,000 of your closest friends.
Yeah, exactly. And I know there isn't as much business done there as there used to be, but there still is a fair amount of business where there are connections, and you see people you don't normally see, and you get to connect and work through that. So
Yeah, it's almost turned into the show where you run into people, you set meetings to have an interaction with somebody, whether it's a publisher or, film studio or production house or something like that. And you sort of, there's so much going on and there's so many people all over the place that it's almost it's almost the place that you now have a meeting so that you can set up a meeting later on.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
It's it's the big shows are, the big shows are great. They're obviously a huge crowd pleaser for the general public, not even just the hardcore fans. So they're great, but they're a different kind of thing than some of the more comic oriented shows, some of the more regional shows, which are a little bit more enjoyable and comic oriented, comic friendly. So which I'm not saying it's a problem in any way. If you go to a comic convention and you look at the guest list and it's movie and TV stars and wrestlers, and you go and you say, well, there aren't enough comic people here, I got ripped off. Well, that's your fault. Look at the guest list. It's you don't go into a pizza joint and order a hamburger. Know what you're getting into and know where you're headed. There's a flavor for everybody.
So when a couple of years ago, I guess longer than that, but I was working for a company that used Salesforce, and their big convention is called Dreamforce in San Francisco, and it is massive. It takes over San Francisco. It is, dozens of hotels and events. And my boss was explaining that it was so overwhelming. He wasn't impressed and he just didn't understand. And I used the San Diego story. I said that, or in this case, Dragon Con, I said, you have to be prepared beforehand. You have to have a plan. You have to do some research. What are the guests I want to see? What are the panels I want to attend? What are the events that are must see? What's my backup? And then also enjoy that sometimes what's going to be the best part of, and I'm going to tie this to Bruce, right? The show, when you see a Bruce concert, is always the highlight. But sometimes what you may think back on is running into someone in the queue or at a bar pre-show, and you guys end up having a great conversation. And, and I can't tell you how many times where I just ran into someone into a lobby of a hotel or at a bar or at a restaurant, and we ended up spending an hour talking just about stuff. And it's like, well, gosh, that was as good as any panel I attended or any meeting, any, listening to anyone, talk.
Yeah, I find that often the unplanned things
Right.
are the ones that are both the most enjoyable and also the ones that bear the most fruit in a professional sense.
Yeah,
Somebody
absolutely.
you bump into in the bar, or in the line at the Starbucks at the convention center, or even just dinner afterwards.
Yeah.
We are social animals. And certainly comics is one of the more social industries, period. So all of that stuff happens kind of when you least expect it.
Absolutely. So the last time we had you on, Letter to You had not come out. So breaking news, Bruce had a new album out at the end of last year. What were your thoughts?
I loved it. It was a kind of a throwback record in some ways. The full, and I have to preface this by saying I love everything that Bruce does.
Yes.
The solo stuff, the more acoustic oriented stuff. I loved Western Stars a bunch. And I know that there are some Bruce fans that, they want that big E Street wall of sound. And that's great. But I like all the flavors on the buffet table.
Yes.
Um, so it was nice to get um, Letter to You and have, quite a big, quite a big sound to it, which we hadn't really gotten in a while. Um, Obviously, I mean, obviously we're here to because we all love what Bruce does. Um, the um, the the fact that you can get all of this stuff is it from the same person, from the same source. To me, is one of the most exciting things about Bruce's whole catalog. Is kind of there's something for every mood. I listen to a lot of Bruce, both on the Sirius XM station and just listening to albums while I work, and I'm forever picking different stuff because I'm in a different kind of mood, or I'm writing a different kind of story. Um, so I found Letter to You to be a real gift because we needed it at that time.
I,
Um,
I totally agree with you. And in fact, I've said the same thing, right? Like, at the end of the fall last year, before we had heard this, I'd said if I got a new president in the fall and a new Springsteen album, maybe 2020 wouldn't be the worst year ever. And I say that slightly tongue in cheek with understanding how much pain and sorrow we had experienced in 2020, but it did was kind of not only the album and not only the documentary, but he did so much press, and such an interesting press. There was a lot of good interviews with him and a lot of discussion. It really did feel like this cold drink of water after being exercising for a long time or something.
yeah, it was a I think for a lot of us it was a very necessary thing to have. Um, and like the SNL appearance, all of this the kind of the cascade of, as you said, the interviews and all of that additional content that we got um, was was really very necessary. I think particularly here, the Northeast in general, New York in specific, um, we had had a pretty good summer, and then things started to
Right.
break down again in the fall, and so and places shuttered, and people did unwise things for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and um, having that album to go back to um, was a real boon for me. I
Yeah.
have the I actually have the vinyl sitting here right next to my desk because I wanted that artifact. I wanted that keepsake of that album from that time.
Yeah, and I have quoted you multiple times, when he had just one of the last times we talked, we discussed about his doing "For My Home to You," and you said something along the lines like, "We know he's a great storyteller, so why are we shocked that he can tell a story in this format?" Right? Something along that lines, and he's continued to do that. I mean, every 2 to 3 weeks he comes up with a different theme, and I guess he mentioned that this is part of the reason he loves doing it is it helps him have an excuse to go explore and find music. But I that's continued to be a treat.
Oh yeah, and the breadth of the catalog that he's picking from,
Yeah.
both both stuff that's I was going to say 40 or 50 years old, Motown stuff, but
Yeah.
even earlier than that,
Yeah.
real kind of folk records and to stuff that came out very recently. Um, it's obvious it's exposing me to new material too. Um, it's the gift that keeps on giving. I listened to obviously I listened to that. I watched the performances by Jason Isbell and Amanda Shires uh, that they were doing from their barn
Yeah.
at the beginning of the pandemic because I'm a huge fan of what they do.
Yes, absolutely.
Like that sort of stuff that helped all of us, I think, feel connected when we were the most isolated. Um, I think I'm always going to look back on, extremely fondly, not just because I enjoyed it, but because I needed it.
Yeah. My friend Sam, who is a huge Springsteen fan and Bob Dylan fan as well, but we met for lunch this week, and he talked about he's going to Shoals Fest coming up, and he says in Alabama. I did not know I needed to go to Muscle Shoals, Alabama, but Jason, Amanda, Lucinda Williams, Drive By Truckers, they're all doing like a 3-day festival. And and I'm like, wow, that talk about, he's vaccinated. He says, I'm ready to get into a festival. I am ready to go enjoy music. And I'm like, good for you. I just think, yeah, I'm a big Jason Isbell fan too. And I just think he's passionate and he's a great writer. And the latest release, when he talked about the song he has, It Gets Easier, but It's Never Easy, um, addressed, not that I have my own addictions. I've never been someone who has had problems with drug or alcohol, but I've had my own share of addictions in other ways. And that song explains it as well as anything I've ever heard.
Yeah, I'm, I kick myself. One of the few shows that has been in the area that I missed is uh, Jason and the 400 unit came to Albany, to the Palace Theater here, where I've seen a bunch of great shows. And it was um, it was just a night where I was so snowed under with deadlines, I just could not get away. And there were actually a few tickets left. I could have gotten into the building, and I'm sitting here working on the script, and it might have been a Thursday night, and just trying
Yeah.
to get stuff in, and you know 9 o'clock rolled around, and I'm thinking, oh man, they're just probably hitting the stage now, and what am I doing sitting here?
Yeah, exactly.
So the lesson for me was, you find a way to go. You gotta,
Exactly.
and certainly, within the last year plus, where we didn't have that option at all, just brings it home even more so.
Yes.
That, yeah, that's a thing you have to do when you have the chance.
Well said.
And both, for both sides of it, both for being in the audience, and also for, I know that, musicians must be just, besides the financial aspect of it, they must just be, jumping through their skins to go out and be in front of people and do what they do. Luckily, what I do is I sit in a room and make up stuff.
Right.
So, that's a solitary pursuit no matter what. But for people who make their living, but also just, make that connection that enlivens them, being in front of an audience, the last year and, 3-4 months, however long people have been out of circulation, has just been, I can't imagine what that's like if that's your life.
Well, one of the things Sam said at his lunch is, he says, and I'm flying, I'm had to buy the ticket. I'm had to fly. I'm getting the hotel room, and it's an extravagance. And I said, but wait a minute, you haven't got to go to a show in a year and a half. I said, and I know Jason Isbell was on Brian Koppelman's The Moment podcast, and he, once again, I'm paraphrasing, but be like, Amanda and I are doing fine financially, but I will tell you, not playing in front of live audience is driving me bonkers. And so I would think, you get these group together. I said, there's a good chance you're going to see some pretty magical moments, Sam. I mean, he's going to play with the Drive By Truckers. He'll do other things. I mean, I just think that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
So,
I think that I think all of it, live shows,
yeah,
comic conventions, all
Yeah.
of that, people are just going to be super hyped to get back to what they see as normal life. It, you know, it is normal life.
Yeah, I totally agree. Um, so what do you got going on? You have a new Kickstarter campaign starting, right?
It's actually not even a Kickstarter.
Oh,
It's on
okay.
a different platform
Oh, well,
called
talk to me.
it's a different platform called Zoop, which was started by a couple of guys I know, have known, you know, for a number of years in the business, and they've started a new comic centric crowdfunding platform called Zoop, which is ZOOP,
Okay.
which is short and sweet and a pretty, you know, pretty clever name to put out there. So, you know, they got in touch with me and said, "Hey, do you have? We're starting this new platform. It's, you know, it's a crowdfunding platform, but we want to kind of streamline some of what Kickstarter does, what Indiegogo does, and um, have it be much more comic centric, at least initially. And I think generally they're gonna stick with that model. So I got together with my friend and sometime co-writer Andy Lanning, and my longtime artistic collaborator Rick Leonardi, and we came up with a big cosmic epic sort of story called Resolution, and we're doing it via this platform. Um, so it's me and Andy Lanning co-writing, Rick Leonardi penciling, and Andy will be inking Rick's pencils because Andy is a terrific inker. So it's very much the three-headed monster on this one, and telling the kind of story that I did in Silver Surfer and Green Lantern, and that Andy did when he was writing Legion of Superheroes and Guardians of the Galaxy. Very much the version that Andy worked on is the version that, you know, that everybody has seen in the movies. And Rick obviously has a long and storied career in comics, drawing everything from, you know, X-Men to Spider-Man to Justice League. So this is, and I'm sure I've, you know, made this comparison before on the show. Comics is one of the things you can make a thing by calling up your friends and saying, "Hey, you want to do this thing?" So that's very much what we're doing on this project. The crowdfunding campaign is running on Zoop right now, and it's called Resolution, and we're having a ball doing it. We're in the early stages of, we've got the story, so we're in the early stages of scripting stuff out and Rick drawing pages, and probably 6 months or so, we'll have the product will be an oversized hardcover.
Nice.
Because we get to pick the format. We get to pick the how this thing comes out. So we decided, well, let's do it big. Let's do it hardcover. Let's have extra pages in there with sketches and behind the scenes material. And there will be a companion book that'll be like 48-page comic size, that is kind of, will have the script in it and Rick's layouts and pencils, and we'll walk you through how the book came together. It'll be very much the DVD extras of the making of our little tale.
So I'm excited about it. We will include the link. Do you want to give the elevator pitch on the story?
Sure. The the elevator pitch, the sort of this meets that Hollywood pitch of it,
Yeah.
is kind of Green Lantern Corps meets Unforgiven.
Ooh.
So it's set in the far future, and our main character is named Zan Maddox. She is a retired hero from a galactic heroic force that sort of keeps peace in the galaxy. She has since retired and retreated to a solitary life as basically a water farmer on an arid planet. So she lives a solitary life. And people from her past come to her and say, your arch nemesis, this epic warlord that she had numerous battles with, her Thanos, if you will, um, is um, is losing his mind. He's in decline, losing his mind, and there's a bounty on his head, and we need that money. So join us. Come help us. Grab up your diminished arch nemesis, and we'll all be set for life. And she is faced with the decision of, do I want to go there and do that again, or do I just want to be left alone? So I don't want to give away more
No,
specifics than that.
no, but that's a great premise.
But her choices, obviously resonate through the story. So we will see glimpses of her past as a hero in her prime, and then the rest of the story obviously is set in the contemporary time frame where she's trying to decide what to do, and her decisions greatly affect the rest of the universe in ways that she did not expect. So the hope is that what we're doing here is the first of at least 3 volumes to tell the overall story.
Well, I'm sold. So it's a Zoop, ZOOP, and search for Resolution or search for Ron Marz and find it. I'll include a link in the show notes. How long of a campaign is this?
I believe we're doing it for a month.
Okay.
It's Kickstarter like in that effect,
Okay.
in that sense, is that it's a bit streamlined.
Yeah.
But if you've ever pledged to a Kickstarter or Indiegogo, this will be familiar.
All right.
And it's basically, I love the rise of crowdfunding projects and Kickstarters, because it allows creators to do what they want to do and take it directly to the audience. And it takes the middleman out of it. It takes the publisher out of it. So that we can do the project exactly what we want, exactly as we want, and we're faced with no editorial constraints, no budgetary constraints other than our own time and effort. It's very much a direct to consumer kind of world that we're living in now. And it allows us to tell the kind of stories we want to tell. And I'm certainly still doing other work for other publishers. We just announced a book that I've got coming out from Aftershock called Almost American, which is the true story of a Russian intelligence operative and his wife, who was also a Russian intelligence operative, who ended up in the United States because they had to flee Russia, and everything that they went through. So that's coming out in September. Working with the guy that it actually happened to, who is named Jan Newman.
Oh, interesting.
Who is kind of my buddy now. My buddy, the ex-Russian spy.
Oh, how fun!
We're doing this project together, and then some other ones. So the beauty of what I do is that I get to till a lot of soil in different fields. So I can do a big cosmic story, and then I can do a true life Russian spy story, and any number of other things that I've got going on, any number of things that I'm juggling, like the Swamp God serial that's running in heavy metal right now. I love to stretch different muscles. I said about Bruce earlier that one of his real strengths as an artist is that you get something different from him all the time. I don't think I pattern myself after Bruce per se, but I try to make sure that I do different things. I don't just hopefully repeat myself. So I'll do a horror story, and then a science fiction story, and then an espionage story. they're all of interest to me. There's nothing that I don't want to try out.
Absolutely. Ron, if someone wants to reach you, what's the best way to do it?
Um, Twitter is my most obvious social platform, which is just at Ron Marz. Um, there's also a sort of fan run Facebook page for me. And my website in dire need of an update still has a contact button on it that
Okay,
reaches me as well. So
good.
so there's any number of ways to poke me, but I find that most things happen on Twitter because it's more immediate.
Absolutely. I understand that. My friend, it was so great to catch up. I am so glad you're doing well. I'm excited about Resolution. That sounds like an epic tale. And I can't wait to when we hang up. I'm going to go and do my little pledge. And I will certainly urge my listeners, if they like what they hear, go over and do the same thing. Are you going to try to see Bruce on Broadway the second time?
I would love to. I know that the ticket, the ticket situation on the day that the tickets went up
Yeah,
was difficult, right? And I thought, oh man,
yeah,
I don't know that I want to invest that deeply into it.
yeah,
And also, maybe take tickets away from somebody who hasn't had the experience yet.
yeah,
That said, if I can get a hold of a ticket or two, I will absolutely go back. It's a train ride for me to get there,
yeah.
and seeing it the first time was honestly one of the best nights of my life. So I would absolutely encourage anybody that has the chance to go, and if the cards play right, I might be sitting next to you.
Sounds very good. I decided not to go. I was lucky enough to see it last time, though I am selfishly praying he doesn't add any new songs. Like people that they were talking about I'll see you in my dreams would be perfect to kind of add that. Like, no, no, I don't want to know there's a new song on there. That will be so tempting. But yeah, I agree with you if you haven't had the chance to see it. And luckily, I've already gotten a couple listeners who did not see it the first run, and they are going to go, and I've asked them to join me on Set Listing Bruce. And then Ken Rosen, who does the great blog, is their opening night, and he's going to join me a couple of days afterwards and kind of talk about opening night. So
It's
I'm excited.
it's a wonderful experience, especially for people who like I'm north of the city, but
Yeah,
I've been in New York City, um, obviously hundreds of times over my lifetime and stayed there, and
yeah,
all of that. For people that haven't come into New York City very often, the whole experience of going to a Broadway show and just being in Midtown, and especially as New York kind of comes back to life,
yeah.
um, it's a tremendous gift, and I hope people can experience it.
Absolutely. My friend, it is always great catching up with you. We'll have to do this again, maybe in the fall,
You know
just to
where to
catch.
find me anytime.
Absolutely.
I'm very pleased that you're back and you're mending. This is just like getting Bruce's album, getting these podcasts, is a source of connection and comfort.
That is very kind of you to say. I appreciate it. Listeners, you please stay safe. Go get vaccinated. It's so easy. If not, you're vaccinated yet, wear your mask. Remember to wash your hands, social distance. Let's get through this together because that's the only way we're going to do it. And for now, take care. We'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlistingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlistingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Listing Brew shirts, as well as a Mary Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now, who does? You can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. Set Listing Bruce is part of the Southgate Media podcast group. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.